I hate my husband now that we have a baby. We didn't plan on having kids because we were told by doctors for almost 20 years that we're infertile. I noticed a change in him when the pregnancy stopped being about him, and he'd make little snide comments whenever I went to the doctor's office about how he didn't get a say in my treatment and how I must have done this in order to trap him. He'd always say he was just joking when I'd bring up that it hurt my feelings, and it got to the point where I cried in the OB waiting room one day after he'd joked again. I didn't find out until super late that I was pregnant, so it was treated as an extremely high-risk pregnancy, and I running around getting months' worth of tests done in a few weeks. I eventually had to explain to my husband that the doctors don't care what his opinion is, because right now they're just trying to make sure I survive and find out if the baby has any issues. I ended up having an emergency C-section after 27 hours of labor. I then had extremely bad postpartum, which he'd brush it off because postpartum is when you're practically catatonic. Nothing matters at all. You are still doing stuff with the baby and responding to people, so it wasn't that bad. When I was 2 months PP, I tried getting an IUD put in, and I nearly vomited and fainted from the pain. Everything downstairs was extremely swollen, dry, and painful. After my appointment, I reminded my husband that he had promised to get a vasectomy after the baby was born. He kept pushing it off despite his doctor giving him a referral, and ended up not showing up to his appointment when it was finally scheduled. We argued about why I couldn't try taking birth control again. Any kind of hormonal birth control ends with me in the hospital. To stop the arguing, I went through 3 different brands before finally calling it quits again. We argued a lot and still argue when the topic of birth control is brought up because he feels that he's being forced to do something he doesn't want to do to his body and that it's unfair for people to expect him to get a vasectomy, but he also refuses to wear condoms. I remind him that if I got my tubes tied, it'd take a lot longer of an approval for surgery, and it'd be a lot more invasive while having a much longer recovery period. The arguments would never get anywhere except for him either storming off or him just refusing to talk to me for the rest of the night. Our sex life has just evolved into him either using a bunch of lube on me or going down on me and throwing a massive tantrum and fit whenever I reject his advances. Then once I'm not super dry anymore, he uses the pull and pray method. There were a few times we tried to ease into things but not have sex, and it would end up with him going all the way and me crying in the bathroom afterwards because I was prettified that I'd get pregnant again and was worried if I had tried stopping him more forcefully then I'd wake up the baby. If I bring up my concerns or if he sees me crying, he'll start yelling and we argue because according to him, I brought up concerns for 20 years about how we should use protection and you brushed me off. So you don't get to complain now. During those 20 years, he mentioned using protection once every couple of years, at which point, yes, I would laugh about it because according to doctors, we were infertile, but I'd always offer for us to go get condoms if he was concerned about it, which he'd then say no because we were already in the middle of things. Then whenever we were out and about afterwards, I'd mention picking up condoms for next time. He'd say no, and then we'd move on. The last argument we had, he ended up saying that he'd refuse to have sex with me until I stopped being crazy, because he had caught me taking multiple doses of the birth control my last OB gave me. We had finished having sex, and after the argument, he tossed the remaining birth control. In all honesty, when he said what he said, I laughed at him and felt like a massive weight was off of my shoulders. I was so relieved. That lasted about 4 days, and then I woke up to him trying to put it in the back door. Since then, sex has been very sporadic, and I've tried to make sure he's done before we actually get to that part of sex. But I've been hating him more and more as this continues. I've noticed that since sex has at least been happening, he's become a much better father and has become a much better partner around the house and is treating me better in day-to-day life. It's almost like the old him is showing more and more, but I can't help but have no love towards him for all of this. I get that he's upset, and I understand that he's frustrated and all of these emotions that I'm also feeling since the baby, but I absolutely hate him for not stepping up as a partner and father until after he got his way about sex. The way that he has been treating me when it comes to sex makes me so angry and hateful towards him because I would hear him champion so hard against guys who would do this crap and would get lost in their own tantrums rather than contributing to their household and taking care of their partner and children. And when it was his time to finally put his money where his mouth is, he failed miserably. I was dealing with bad enough postpartum that my therapist was constantly suggesting I check myself into a hospital and have my mother watch the baby, and all my husband could bother caring about was sex and getting his sleep. I have a doctor's appointment next week, and I'm really hoping I'll finally be able to get an IUD put in, but I don't know what I'm going to do if I can't get one in. I just am really hating my husband, and I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to get past all of this. Neither of us planned on a baby, and I was really hoping he'd actually step up like I had to with parenthood, and instead, he's just doing all of this bullshit.